Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christianson. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it. Hey, Dr. Christianson here with you, and this is about iodine on the rise. If we look between the period of the early 1990s to 2010, the iodine content of many foods has gone up by about 300%. We can also say that's a threefold increase. And over a same sort of time frame, we also see that thyroid disease has dramatically increased. Thyroid cancers are up roughly threefold over that time frame. The rate of thyroid prescriptions is also up roughly threefold. And we're also seeing a larger trend to where autoimmune disease of other types is rising. And the other correlation noticed, besides just iodine and thyroid disease, has been iodine and total mortality. A recent study that came out showed that the population's intake of iodine has been increasing, and this correlates with higher risk of total death from all causes. Here's a quote: "Higher all-cause mortality among those with excess iodine intake compared to individuals with adequate iodine intake highlights the importance of monitoring population iodine status." So what we're seeing is that following people for 19 years, this was a group of 12,000 adults between age 20 and 80, they saw 3,159 deaths from all causes. And they knew that higher iodine intake can correlate with overactive or underactive thyroid function, and those can both correlate with risks for death, so they thought that iodine itself might be a risk factor, and they found that it clearly was. And they did a good job. It could have been just simply perhaps more food, more iodine from more total food, or from more salt. But even after correlating for total salt intake and total caloric intake, iodine was still an independent risk factor for all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, and cancer increase. So, yeah, big thing. Now, why is it going up? Well, the FDA has done a total diet study, and they've been doing this since 1982. They look at 4 different regions in America. They test between 1 to multiple times per year. And what they've seen is that the top 25 dietary sources of iodine, comparing against the early 90s to the mid-2000s, like 2010 period, the top 25 iodine dietary sources, 23 of them were higher, and many again by threefold. So 23 out of the 25 top dietary sources of iodine have gone up, and many of those have tripled. The biggest outliers have been baked goods and dairy foods. And it's thought that this is the biggest single driver behind much of this increase in thyroid disease. Here's a quote from the Total Diet study: "The mean concentration of iodine in, chocolate cake, for a consumer good, for example, increased by well over 300%. Concentrations of iodine in milk increased by 100%. And here's some examples of foods that have gone up by a lot. And as I talk about the amount of iodine in these foods, please keep in mind that the upper safe limit per day is around 200 micrograms, somewhere close to that. So based on some of the recent total dietary studies, they found that sherbet, I've heard sherbet, it's probably not right, but yeah, sherbet, I don't say the word a lot, fruit flavored, per serving, 1,480 micrograms of iodine. Yeah, commercial cake, like cake from a mix or cake from a bakery, you can have 1,300 micrograms of iodine per serving. Sugar cookies, 750. Hard candy, any flavor, 680 micrograms. Commercial bread, white bread, 610 micrograms. Whole wheat bread, commercial bread, 530. Meal replacement beverages, so think about like Ensure pre-made protein drinks, 490 micrograms. Commercial bagel, a plain old bagel you could get toasted, if that matters, 410 micrograms. You go to Dunkin' Donuts, you get a donut, and this actually wasn't the brand name per se, but cake type from a donut store, 350 micrograms. A fruit-flavored popsicle, 290 micrograms. So hold on. So popsicles and hard candy, what's the deal there? Uh, One theory has been uh, red number 3, one of the colors that's used, but it's not definitive. But we see this in some odd places, and that's one of those. Boiled eggs, 230 micrograms. Uh, Pop Tarts, also not by brand name, but breakfast tart, toaster pastry, 170 micrograms. A piece of Swiss cheese, 150. Pepperoni, carryout, 140. Here's a bizarre one. This one almost breaks so many of the other rules. Frozen cantaloupe. There was an assay of commercial bought frozen cantaloupe, and the products had 130 micrograms of iodine per serving. So we'll come to in other episodes about some other outliers and categories, but you're pretty safe with fruits and vegetables, but that's one of the few outliers. You don't want to buy frozen cantaloupe from a store. Uh, Fast food, milkshake, 100 micrograms. Carryout, Chinese food, beef and vegetables, 98 micrograms. What else? Yeah, nothing else too unusual there. Well, prune juice, that's actually one other outlier. So prune juice has been high on a lot of these assays, 61 micrograms. Oh, decaf coffee, flavored. You get that from a large coffee chain store. That can be 50 micrograms. So you guys see how this starts to add up. And the problem is getting too much, but a little bit deeper, part of the problem is getting amounts that are really erratic. The too little, too much, or rapid changes all can cause strain to your thyroid. So here was an assay in which they got a brand of pizza from the supermarket. So and I'm making up, these are not the brands. I'm just making these things up. You go to Safeway and you get a, what do they have, like Tombstone pizza, right? And then you go down the street to another Safeway, or you go to an Albertsons and you get the exact same Tombstone pizza. So pizza in this brand in one location, per serving, 191 micrograms of iodine. Now, the exact same pizza at a different location, 51 micrograms of iodine. So you hear this stuff and you realize it's out of control. And our processed food has amounts that you'd never expect, and it's all over the place. They've got really no good regulation on that. It's too erratic. It's changing too much. So what's been theorized is that some of these high sources, like what we're finding in cakes, breads, pizzas, other baked goods, sherbet, meal replacement beverages, popsicles, this probably is reflective of the variability of iodide in dough conditioners, but then also the use of milk products, eggs, seaweed-based gums like carrageenan, and red number 3. And these things all can be sources of iodine, but the amount of iodine in them, especially in the milk products, the eggs, the dough conditioners, the iodine in those things as ingredients can vary. And that's why the actual iodine in the commercial products themselves can vary. So yeah, that's a quick primer about iodine on the rise. We've seen that since the late 80s, early 90s. Between then to 2010, the overall iodine content has gone up about 3-fold. And that tracks closely with the increase in thyroid disease in terms of autoimmune disease in general, hyperthyroidism, prescriptions for thyroid medications, thyroid cancer, all these things are up. And in addition, there's now data showing that even if you pull out other variables, this increased iodine, not only thyroid disease, but it tracks with all causes of mortality, including cardiovascular mortality and cancer. So it's a big deal. I want to make you guys aware of that. This has been about iodine on the rise. Dr. Christianson here with you, and I'll talk with you more really soon. Bye-bye. Hey, Dr. Christianson here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christianson on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much, and I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.